doing a little, I don't know, preview warm up live. I'm not exactly sure. I just felt like I had all this energy and I wanted to like preview some stuff and get ready. So that was kind of fun. Plus, I think a lot of people maybe don't know on Instagram that I switched over to YouTube. So I thought it might be a good way to just like remind everybody that I'm doing Witchy Wednesday lives on YouTube. Speaking of which, Happy New Year. It is a brand new January 1st, 2025, and I'm really stoked for it. I was talking on my very brief Instagram live how 2025 has been kind of called by astrologers, the year when everything changes. And everything does indeed change. 2025 sees all of the outer planets moving signs. I talked about this on Instagram a little bit, but yeah, I mean it's around. I'm sure you've heard of it if you're in those circles at all, even tangentially. But Neptune goes into Aries, the sign of the warrior. So we've got this like dreamlike mystification, idealization, romanticization over archetypes like the warrior, the paladin, right? The knight fighting for what they believe in. I think we're going to see some romanticization there. Other astrologers have said things similarly to that as well. And I agree. We've also got Uranus moving into Gemini. I'm very afraid of that, but it could be very cool and very interesting. Technological advancements and huge shake-ups and things that we already seem very much primed for that. So that makes a lot of sense. And then, we've got Jupiter going into Cancer, which is very exciting. Jupiter's exalted in Cancer. Cancer is the nurturer. Jupiter's the greater benefic, tends to spiritually enlighten and uplift wherever he goes. Also, the thing that's interesting about Jupiter in Cancer is Jupiter is big. It's got big energy, but Cancer really focuses in on what's important, right? Really circles in on that center of like, what am I going for? Like, what is my emotional drive? Usually it's to protect or nurture things that are valuable to us. Valuable not in a commercial sense, but in an emotional sense, in a connective sense, right? Like our children, our parents, our ancestors, our roots, our innate feeling, these kinds of valuables, right? We're protecting our values. So anyway, I think Jupiter being the greater benefic in Cancer is going to feel really good for a lot of people, depending on where Jupiter is in your chart and where Cancer is in your chart, is what I'm going to say. So that's going to be really fun. And then Saturn goes into Aries. Saturn is in fall, and Aries doesn't do well. For the life of me, who was it that said this? There's some astrologer, and they said Saturn in Aries is like having one foot on the brake and one foot on the gas. And I thought that's very funny, because Saturn is all about slow and diligence, patience, routine, restrictions, regulations, rules. And Aries is like, fuck it, let's go. Aries is like the fighter, is like, we got to go right now. Very impatient, starting off the new zodiacal order, like bold and bright and individualistic. So Saturn in Aries tends to be a placement where, you want to really get going and take on everything all at once, but actually what you need to do is be patient. And so I do think, yeah, there's going to be a need for patience. And not only will there be a need for patience, but there will be a disdain for it. So it's going to be a nice little conflict there. So that's going to be interesting. So yeah, I mean, and then we have Pluto just recently moved into Aquarius, which everybody was losing their shit about because yes, it is very relevant. And what's also fun about Pluto is, if you think about it, there are people theoretically that will never really have that like meaningful experience of Pluto going over one of their planets. Like they just, they won't, because in a lifetime, Pluto can only go over so many places. I think it makes, depending on how long your life is, right? But it's realistic to expect maybe like, I don't know, I had like 3, 4, or something like that, like planetary sign changes for Pluto. Like it retrogrades all the time, and it takes like, oh, I don't know. I think this Aquarius transit's like 20 years, isn't it? So I knew this answer at one point, but I cannot retain numbers in my head without looking at information. I have to look at the charts. But anyway, they last a really long time. We only have so many groupings of 20 years in us, each one of us. And so on the one hand, yeah, Pluto, like deep, transformative, like trial by fire, reborn into the underworld kind of shit. But not everybody's going to get those experiences. Like Pluto's not going to go over everybody's natal planets necessarily, depending on where they are. It won't touch some of them. Maybe some by aspect or whatever. I have Capricorn rising, so Pluto for most of my like remembered life has been over my rising, the house of self. Yeah, it kind of was intense, I suppose, in retrospect. I wasn't tracking it at the time because I wasn't an astrologer really when it started. Um, I mean, I knew of astrology, but like I wasn't at all serious about it at that time when it started. And so it's interesting because being aware of astrology really gives you a specific lens for mindfulness and to like remember cycles and to think about what that was. And I think that it was very challenging having Pluto go over my rising, where, by the way, I have Neptune and Uranus in my first house as well. So it did go over those planets when it passed. And like, yeah, I do think like the way that my spirituality was radically transformed, the way that I think things should be broken and shaken up was definitely transformed. My identity, it completely like, yeah, it got completely put in through the mills and like remade. And I think in retrospect, that was really difficult. Like there was a lot of really difficult things about it. And then when Pluto left my rising, I felt much, much better. But because that had happened, I was very worried about what it was going to do to my second house, where my Saturn is as well. And I think it's really interesting because like if your rising sign is Aquarius, this is now going into your first house. So, I feel for you. Um, I don't know. I think there's something really special about how there now our scope of the cosmos is such that we can track planets that are so big, are so outside of our orbit, are so generational and like time, like mark big chunks of time, right? And it doesn't affect everybody. So it's on the one hand, I used to feel very envious, like, oh, you're never gonna have Pluto go over your rising, like that's so awesome. Like honestly, that's so awesome. But on the other hand, Pluto has this ability to bring intense transformation, and I'm not sure. I guess there are pros and cons to everything. Like everything, there are pros and cons, and it doesn't make a person better or more worthy or more anything to have Pluto go over you or not. But it is a unique experience, and I do think from a sheer point of like data collection, for astrology, that's kind of valuable. It's valuable to know what that feels like. And so, it was shitty in a lot of ways, but in other ways, it was really nice to have this bedrock of information. Like if you're an Aquarius rising, I have some idea of what that's going to feel like for you. And somebody who has oh, I don't know, Aries rising, won't necessarily have that information. They won't have that direct experience. But then again, that's how astrology is, right? You only know your own chart, and it's just, it's one of those things like, we're so blessed to have the direct experiences that we have because then we know what they feel like. And other people who have similar experiences, then, we can be a source of light for them, of information, of solace, of comfort. We can be an example for them, and vice versa, right? People who've gone through what we're going through, that's a source of inspiration. That's a source to ask, to help. That's so benefic, honestly. And that's what I think of also when I think of Jupiter, is like having somebody to ask for help, having somebody to teach you. When you're lost and confused and you don't know which way is up, having somebody who's been through that is like, that is truly a benefic thing. That is a good experience. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. But yeah, it's like gonna be crazy, Neptune going into Aries, I'm worried about. I have worried feelings about, just talked about it on Instagram, but like, Aries is ruled by Mars. Mars is the warrior. In Aries, it's the paladin, the knight, the direct conflict and fight for what you believe in, as opposed to Scorpio, which is, by night, the ninja, the assassin, the precise striker. Like we don't have to have our actions known. We just need to get it done, right? Those are the two kind of sides of Mars. Neptune, this planet of spirituality, of collective consciousness, fantasy, delusions, like just dreams, it's a big, wide unknown, the dissolving of the ego, the blending of borders into everything, right? Um, it's very interesting. Austin Coppock, he has with Chris Brennan this like year ahead astrology kind of what's Chris Brennan's podcast, but Austin Coppock has been a guest on it for a while now for the year ahead astrology. One of the really interesting things they were talking about is Neptune, and I hadn't thought about this particular angle before. But Neptune has a tendency to make everything what it is, like what sign it is. Neptune went into Pisces, where we have this like mystical oneness, this spiritual elevation. Neptune went into Pisces, and suddenly everybody was like a witch. Everybody was a shaman. Everybody was connected to source, to some kind of spirituality. It seemed like all of a sudden everyone was an astrologer. Like all of these big kind of mystical things that before weren't the case, everybody started to kind of open their eyes to, because Neptune was like bringing this kind of borderless, dissolving energy into this area. Even people who had never thought about it before were more open to those kinds of things. And I looked at it because I was like, oh shit, I looked and I was like, "Oh, man, when Neptune went into Pisces, that did correspond with, like, my I had always before that been kind of, like, interested in, like, witchcraft, spirituality, and astrology, and all of those topics. They had been in my peripherals, I'd been interacting with them kinda casually, but when Neptune went into Pisces for me, that happened around, like, my early 20s, and, yeah, I became incredibly dedicated to that spiritual path. I became, like, in it. I was like, "Yes, this is me now." You know what I mean? And that did also coincide with, for me, Pluto going over all these planets, Neptune and Uranus in my rising. So it was, like, very much felt for me in my identity and not necessarily for other people depending on your placements. Um, but I was like, "Oh, yeah, that does time the timeline does check out." And I wouldn't have known that necessarily because during that first stint into this kind of more serious, taking these things more seriously, I wasn't tracking the planets as vigorously, so I wasn't really paying attention. Um, Whereas now, with hindsight, now that I have all of this information, I'm like, yeah, that does line up. Like around my 20s, that is when I got really interested into mysticism and the mysteries. And that's when Neptune went into Pisces. So it did get me a little bit worried about Neptune going into Aries because, they were hypothesizing, oh, this is the romanticization, the glorification of the warrior. And if Neptune went into Pisces and everybody became an astrologer, witch, shaman, Neptune goes into Aries, everybody becomes a warrior, everybody becomes a champion, everybody becomes a paladin, everybody gets really intense about fighting for what they believe in, fighting for their spirituality. And I don't love historically how that flavor tastes in the mouth of humanity. So I am a little anxious about that. On the other hand, life happens, right? Whether you know of these patterns or not. So being anxious about it in advance isn't really helpful. I think there could be some really good applications of that energy. I do think it is time people fight for what they believe in. And I hope that this ultimately brings us closer together as humans, right? That this helps us to be like effectively able to like with it's one thing to have ideals of like justice and valor and like kinship and all these things. It's one thing to say like, oh yes, justice is good, but justice doesn't really mean anything if you're not willing to fight for it. And I think that's I was talking on Instagram just before I popped on here, but that is one of those things that I have difficulty reconciling. Like I don't like violence, however, history shows, right? Most big acts of change, better or worse, they are accompanied by pretty intense violence. And I don't like to think that it's necessary. I like to think that we could evolve past that we could be better than that. But so far, that has not been the case. So take that what you will. But it does make me nervous, is what I'm saying. And, okay, so I have a Capricorn rising, and Saturn is ruling my chart from the second house. Saturn is domicile in Aquarius for me. It's very strong. I do tend to be past oriented. I like to look at and glorify the past. I care very deeply about what dead people think. I like weird old things. I like weird old traditions because Saturn is in Aquarius for me. I think those have a lot of value. So when I see things like, I don't know, Uranus going into Gemini and Gemini being this like youthful, curious, social, kind of morally ambiguous application of Mercury, this trickster deity, already prone to technology, already prone to experimentation past the point of ethical reasoning. And then I see Uranus, this planet of like, oh, I don't know, shakeups, earthquakes, huge sudden revelations and revolutions. I get nervous. I don't love the way AI has developed. I don't love the way people are talking about manipulating dreams and putting ads in your dreams and microchips in your brain. I don't love that for us. There are some really good positive applications. I don't want to be a retrograde either. Like technology is very useful and very important and has helped a lot of people in a lot of really key ways. And so it's just like everything, and I keep having to remind myself because 2025 is, as astrologers say, as we say, the year that everything changes. And change can be good or bad, but it's often very uncomfortable. So, I am worried about it, but I'm also excited for it. I think there's going to be a lot of good things that come out of it too. I hope anyway. I'm trying to manifest that. So, and yes, we can use Astara. Let's use Astara. So thank you for getting me back on track. Um, I'm still a little bit, I had the flu and I know it was the flu because we got tested for it. It's fine. But it was the worst flu of my life. That's why I had missed a couple of these Witchy Wednesdays, was because I literally like could not talk without coughing. I still probably sound really congested. It's been the worst flu I have ever had in my entire life. It was so bad. It lingers. It's like I'm still like it's 2 weeks later and I'm still just like totally congested. Um, I don't recommend it. Stay away from people who are sick. If you have kids, Godspeed. You know, nothing gives you sickness like the children in your life. Little petri dishes, them. It's like nuts. I don't know. You need to drink some coffee. I once heard this meme on Instagram. You know how memes are. I have no idea who made it. But there was this meme that was like, oh, I used to think I had a really good immunity, but actually I was just really good at not getting coughed on directly in the face. Like that's like having kids is just wild, man. They have just no sense of, I mean, why would they, right? They're still learning, but it's nuts. Oh, also one more announcement. So Kickstarter fulfillment for the Children of Ostara is underway. We've printed now most of the labels, but we have not shipped out, like, because of the flu, because of the holidays. Oh my gosh, I got so far behind. I was really disappointed in that. We have a bunch of packages all packaged up at the warehouse ready to be shipped, but we just haven't gotten around to shipping them yet. And then my mom's birthday is today, so, well, it was yesterday, but we're celebrating it today. It was the day before yesterday. Sorry, I don't know how time works. New Year's Eve. I'm so bad. Like, liminal spaces are so hard for me. New Year's is one of those holidays that's really hard for me to grasp because I'm like, okay, is the holiday the last day of the new year or the last day of the old year or the first day of the new year? Is it January 1st or is it December 31st? And like, it's actually technically midnight on, so neither, and I don't know. I like did not know it was New Year. I had to be constantly reminded that New Year's is a holiday where this is a holiday, right? And I was like, what, the years come and they keep coming. Like, is is it really a holiday or what? Like, it's just a thing that happens, isn't it? But anyway, so you've been spitting facts this whole time. Thanks. I hope that's true. Yeah, there's so many things to reconcile, right? It's so hard. Everything's got a pro and a con. Everything's got a yes and a no, and it's like, where is the line? Anyway, okay. Point is, and the flu. The flu is hard. That is a fact. This flu is particularly hard. Woof. Don't get it. Anyway, yes. So Kickstarter. Yeah. So we are maybe like halfway through, but you guys have to remember that like halfway through 2,000 orders is still like 1,000 orders. So if you haven't gotten your thing yet or it hasn't shipped yet, don't be alarmed. It's totally possible that that's you. We've also been batching it in ways that are kind of necessitated by what goods we have. Like our my crafts person for the apothecary boxes did send us an initial shipment of boxes, but it's not done. Like he has to keep making the boxes and he makes them by hand. So we're only able to ship out people with apothecary box orders like in small batches according to when he gives them to us, right? So there, some people will get them now and some people will wait till much later because that's just the way that lineup has to go. And then also, we didn't get the lithomats in the batch with the rest of these mats, like the new lithomats that are slightly bigger. So people who ordered those also were waiting until we get the mats to ship those out. So we've been batching them, but it's a little bit uneven because it just, we basically have everything, but there are some things that are still filtering in, and I didn't account for that. I forgot. We got most of the mats and I was like, we have the mats, but we're missing one of them. So I like flipped out about it. I like texted my manufacturer. I'm like, we're missing one of the mats. And then she's like, no, don't worry. Remember we talked about this? You had a batch of defective gold editions. We had to reprint them. We're sending the mats with those next gold edition decks that had to be scrapped and redone. And I was like, oh, okay. So they're on their way. They're accounted for. They're just not with us yet. But all the other mats are, and it confused me because I rush and lump things together sometimes. Anyway, this is also part of the reason I'm worried about Uranus going into Gemini. I have Mars natally in Gemini, and Uranus is interesting because it's an outer planet. It moves slowly. It wasn't discovered until somewhat recently in the history of astrology, which is incredibly old. And before, like, we associate now, lots of people, modern astrologers, will associate Uranus with things like earthquakes and shakeups and, conflicts. Wow, excuse me. My congestion has just gotten all of a sudden very much worse. Anyway, my point is, before Uranus, though, a lot of those attributes were actually attributed to Mars. Like, Mars ruled over, physical calamities like earthquakes, like any kind of thing that physically hurt you, that, ripped you apart, that was physically dangerous. It was attributed to Mars. And people got, incredibly accurate astrological results from those associations. So even though I have no context for what, Uranus and Gemini is going to be like, I do know what Mars and Gemini is like. And I think that there's going to be more emphasis on technology. Obviously, Mars is not really rooted in technological anything. Um, but I do think that that's part of why I worry about it. Like Mars and Gemini is like scattered and intense, right? Scattered and aggressive, you know. Um, Now for me, it's in the sixth house, which is Mars's joy. And so when I want to get things done, I get really, really agitated, really activated, driven, motivated. I also get really, really scattered, and I go quick and I overlook things because Gemini does that. Gemini is playful and curious and youthful and very much into fucking around and finding out. So that comes with its pitfalls, and I worry because Uranus and Gemini, I just imagine technological explosions past ethical boundary or restriction, right? Like the ability to make paraplegics walk again, and the ability to like just absolutely fuck with millions of people. Like, I don't know. I'm worried because I do think on the one hand, Uranus and Gemini is going to see some crazy technological improvements that are going to be like I don't know, sci-fi-ish, right? Just like on the one hand, miraculous. On the other hand, how long before technology is misused? How long before technology is used for the purposes of destruction and calamity and warfare and global currency? I mean, yeah, so the nuclear age, right? We got microwaves and nuclear bombs. I don't know. I don't think microwaves make up for it. I don't know. Whatever. It's hard because change is hard. That's the root of it, right? And astrology is just tracking the flavor of the change. So it's I worry, but I'm also kind of excited. Kind of I want to see what happens. I think it's going to be wild. I think it's going to be really, really wild. I'm hoping that ultimately it's for the best. There are some really good things. I mean, Venus is going to be exalted in Pisces really soon. I think that happens on the 3rd. I'm not totally sure. I have to check my clocks, but check my charts. But I think it happens on the 3rd. And then Jupiter is going to be exalted soon too. It's going to go into Cancer sometime this year. When does it go into Cancer? Like, I want to say sometime in the summer, but I don't remember. I have to look. I'm so bad at dates. Oh, it's a shame. Anyway, yeah, usually I have my little iPad where I can track. I'll use all of my astrology apps and stuff. I'm better at synthesizing information than I am at retaining dates and timelines, so I do need help with the actual like specific dates of things. Um, but that is one area where technology really comes in handy, right? Like I can write really beautifully if I have spell check. Do you know what I mean? I guess that's what I'm saying though. Like having planets, like really active planets like Mars or Uranus and Gemini, it's like one of those things where it's quick, it's fast, and things get left out. Things get kind of uh they launch before they're ready, right? They launch before they've thought of consequences. So that's something that I'm worried about. I'm really happy with the Children of Ostara though. I've been using it more, I've been working with it more, obviously since the test deck, but now the real thing in my hands, and um I feel good about it actually. Although this card is supposed to be that way. Let's pull some cards. Let's pull some cards and talk about them. Okay, so we have the Moon reversed. How funny. And we have the Magician, and we have the Tower. This is basically exactly what I'm talking about. So, okay, so let's talk about this really quick. First of all, the Moon reversed. Also or maybe it would just be better to move the camera. I don't know. I'm not, technology is hard. Anyway, so we have this Moon reverse. I'm going to flip it over so you guys can see the artwork, but it is reversed, and that's very relevant. So in the Children of Ostara, the moon is associated with the moonflower, obviously, which is a type of morning glory. It blooms at night. It's related to the morning glory. It's sometimes called the tropical morning glory or the morning glory vine. And it is poisonous, and if you eat it, it will cause delusions. It will cause hallucinations and that kind of thing. It's a poisonous plant. It blooms at night, and it's beautiful and pure, and it just is wildly romantic. So obviously the moon. Obviously, very much that. She's holding this purple serpent because serpents represent the hidden, the arcane, the mysterious, the secret, whether it's wisdoms or sins or trials or temptations, right? It's everything that is hidden. Snakes hide in the grass, but they're also connected. They're connected to the earth. The moon often represents the physical body, and our bodies are of the earth, right? So the snake is inherently connected to the mother body, right? To the body of earth. The snakes hibernate within the earth. They literally sojourn into the underworld, the world under the earth, and then come out and are they can smell with their taste, right? They're incredibly in tune to the inner mysteries of the natural world, and they're crazy to look at. They contort into crazy shapes, and that's part of it too, right? They're able to act quickly, to adapt. They're incredibly reflexive. The moon is related to our body, to the people, like the people. If you gave a speech to the people would be the moon, right? Jupiter might be the person talking, or the sun might be the person talking, depending on if it's a teacher, guru, or like a politician, king. But the people, the collective body of identity, right? The collective body of a nation, of a group, of the earth, that is the moon. The moon is also feeling, sensation, memories, moods, habits, things that were ingrained into our bodies early on. It's hard for me because my moon is peregrine. It means it's not it has no essential dignity. It's in Aries. It's in the fourth house, so it is well suited to that terrain. But it's not really well suited to that sign, and it's conjunct my IC in my chart, which is the lowest point of the chart. Things that are conjunct the IC, on the one hand, connect us to our roots, our ancestors, the foundations of the things we build upon. But it's also hard for us to consciously see it because it's literally, if you imagine your life as a house, the IC is the actual deepest foundational part of that house. It's covered by the floor, it's covered by your furniture, it's covered by whatever. Like, it's hard to see, and yet it's necessary to stand on and to build on. Anyway, so the moon is conjunct the IC in my chart. So it took me a long time to realize this, but emotions are embodied experiences, y'all. I did not realize this. I have the very unfortunate habit of intellectualizing all of my feelings immediately and protecting myself from the actual physical sensation of those feelings. But when you're embarrassed, your face heats up, you feel hot, your stomach drops, right? When you're elated or excited, your stomach feels light, your heart flutters, your head might get a little bit lightheaded, right? These are physical feelings. Our feelings live inside of our homes, our bodies, right? The homes of our souls. But they also are physical and instinctual and responsive in the same way that the moon is. And also they change, right? They fluctuate the same way that the moon changes and fluctuates in the sky. It's very interesting because I'm working still on the podcast episode for the High Priestess, and the High Priestess is actually associated with the moon in astrology, and the moon in tarot is associated with the zodiac sign Pisces. Pisces is borderless. Pisces is collective. Pisces also is, the ocean, right? It's very often linked to oceanic metaphors and poetic romanticizations of the sea and things like that. And when you think about the sea, it's important to remember that it's honestly much like the world. It's much like the cosmos, the sea of air, right? But it's very easy for us to conceptualize. For some reason, it's easier to conceptualize in the ocean. Every single entity that lives in the ocean is connected by virtue of the water of the ocean. It's always permeating, co-permeating through every creature. It goes into their gills, into their bodies, everything from their virtues to their vices, right? Like, you go in the ocean and you're standing in this collective organism where everything is one, everything is the same and connected by the water molecules flowing into and out of everything. Your skin cells are being taken into the ocean. The fish feces is all around you. The fish life, like, things are living and dying and birthing and breathing all in this ecosystem that is all connected because water dissolves and connects everything. And that is incredibly mysterious and romantic. So Pisces. It also is the place of nightmares and anxieties and terrors because, yes, the ocean is dark and deep and home to things we have never seen and can never imagine. Imagine, if you will, for a minute, if you can, being your ancestor who went on a boat across the sea at a time when there was no electricity, there were no lights in the darkness beyond lanterns or candles. There was nothing. There was nothing. The sea was a dark, tumultuous place where things lived and died. Like, giant giant creature's fins could be seen coming up from out of the ocean depths, but never really understood. The shape that those fins belonged to was shrouded in mystery and illusion. People drew sea monsters on maps of the ocean because the ocean was home to our monsters. Like, I cannot, on the one hand, it's so romantic and it's so terrifying to think of being a human, a small, weak little human on a boat with like maybe, I don't know, 8, 10, 20 other little humans sailing to unknown waters with only the stars to guide you. Imagine seeing, if you will, like the fin of a shark stick out through the water, or a breaching whale on the horizon, or dolphins underneath you. I mean, like the kinds of mystery that that holds. It's, I mean, we have so many myths collectively about like, I don't know, cities under the water, people, mer people under the water, leviathans and monsters. Like, Pisces has all of that in it because Pisces is the sign where the zodiac ends and begins its new cycle, where egos dissolve and become one, like the ocean, right? When you are in the ocean, let's imagine, when you decay in the ocean, your body is now a part of everything in the ocean, right? It very much disintegrates, right, and unifies. It brings everything together by pulling everything apart. Like soup, right? When you make soup, you have all these individual ingredients and you throw them in this boiling water, and then the soup doesn't really taste like the potato or the carrot or the meat. It tastes like everything because that's what it is. It's everything because water links everything. We are mostly water. Our planet is mostly water. When we feel things, it's like waves. They're shifts. Where I had never experienced true grief until my grandmother died last summer, and I was really struck by how much like being underwater it is, like how much like experiencing waves it is. You come up for breath and it's fine. Everything's fine. Everything's normal. The sun is shining. Everything's beautiful. Everything's wonderful. And then all of a sudden, somebody says something about burgundy, and my nana always said burgundy's a money color. And then it's like a flood of grief pulls you back under, and it's just by like nothing, the tiniest little external thing. And it's so wild to me that I never knew that before. But the point is, yes, our emotions are incredibly embodied. They're also something that link us and bring us together. They permeate through reason and every other thing. Pisces is the sign where that comfortably happens. You know what I mean? It makes sense for Pisces to be associated with the moon. It did always bug me early on in tarot. I wanted the moon to be associated with the moon, but it is what it is. And it does sort of make sense. It's about the romance, the romantification, the beautification, the dissolving, the oneness, the boundarylessness, and that also it breeds romantic visions and inspirations and dreams and fantasies, and also incredible anxiety and nightmares. The moon. When we think about the moon. And I talk about this in the High Priestess because, again, the moon is associated with the High Priestess in tarot in astrology, and it therefore corresponds or links the moon and also Pisces into this astrological world, in my mind at least, because I am looking for connections. I like to synthesize. The High Priestess, this symbolizes the moon in astrology, and so it's linked to the moon in tarot, and it's interesting to think about those two things together. But my point is, though, the same phenomenon that is responsible for turning, like, I don't know, a chair full of clothes into the scariest monster you can imagine is also the phenomenon that allows us to, like, imagine, oh, I don't know, universal peace and oneness, right? Like, imagine, intimately connecting with people. It's that same push and pull of illusion and fantasy and daydream and compassion and hope and fear. They're all kind of mixed together, and the moon in tarot encapsulates all of that. It is the good and the bad. It is the hope, the dream, and the fear, the despair. And Pisces, as being the sign that is incredibly attuned to this kind of natural shifting of emotion, is also susceptible to great bouts of anxiety and fear. They tend to pick up other people's emotions and adopt them as though they were their own. They can become incredibly agitated, like a fish trying to be snagged out of water, or they can be incredibly cool and peaceful and like go with the flow. And they can be very adaptable on the one hand, and yet they follow the emotional currents on the other. And so when I say Pisces too, I'm like not talking about Pisces suns necessarily. But yes, also Pisces suns, because the sun is our source of identity. But if you have like a lot of planets in Pisces in your chart, you're going to get some of this. You know what I mean? It's going to be flavored by that planet naturally, of course. Venus in Pisces is exalted because Venus has the room to imagine and grow and chill. I mean, imagine like the pure beauty of the ocean, which Pisces is so commonly depicted by, or, symbolically represented with. I mean, it's the fish, right? Fish are in the ocean. Imagine just like the beauty, like imagine being in a beautiful, pristine, perfectly temperature, like ocean or river, floating along on your back, just imagining all of the beautiful things that always were, always will, feeling yourself as this like oneness with nature. I mean, those are the kinds of things that this is why Venus is exalted in Pisces. Like it's so easy to see yourself as beautiful and worthy and wonderful when you contextualize yourself in the oneness of everything, in the wonder of everything. When you see yourself as a little universe onto yourself, as a little miracle of creation, it's easy to feel good about yourself and to feel good about other people and to be compassionate and to be nice to other people. And Venus is relational. Venus wants harmony and beauty and love and trust. And in Pisces, there's the opportunity to bring that out regardless of reason or logic or any other thing. It's able to do that because the imagination is such a big part of Pisces. The imagination, the hopes and the fears. When Venus is in Pisces, we get good, nice things out of it. It feels good, right? Venus really expands and allows herself to relax, put her hair down and just vibe. Like it's an awesome feeling. If Mars went into Pisces, that would be a different story. Mars is our ability to have conflict and aggression, to fight and to rival, to competition, right? You might be seeing fights where they don't exist if Mars is in Pisces. You might just have generalized anxiety, fight or flight reflexes like pushed up. So Pisces is the ocean, affected, pulled this way and that by the moon, or at least corresponds to the changing of the lunar cycles and phases. And the moon is the body. The body is where the emotions are held. And Pisces is kind of, understands this oneness, this lack of boundary ultimately between everything and within everything, right? Our emotions are not facts. Our emotions don't care about facts, but our emotions are there, right? Regardless of anything. And they are stimulated by outside external events. And they often tell us things, really valuable insights that we just don't get if we ignore them. Like they're very, very important things. It took me a long time to realize that they were also embodied things. I tend to intellectualize my emotions, and like I said, my moon is in Aries, ruled by Mars, and my Mars is in Gemini, ruled by Mercury. And so, yeah, I can feel angry about something really easily because my moon is in a Mars sign. I can be defensive and I can fight for things pretty easily. But if I have a true, genuine feeling, a lot of the times that's immediately taken up to Mercury and intellectualized. Speaking of Mercury, it's the magician. Here it is. um, Mercury is the mind. Mercury is the ability to look at the threads connecting everything, look at the tapestry of fate and free will, and pluck the strings as though they were on a lyre to form a melody that is pleasing to the ear, that is desired by the audience and the magician or musician, both, right? The Mercury aspect is our ability to fuck around and find out. It's that playful trickster. It's that wise sage. We cause an effect, we look at it, we observe it, we think about what that did, and then we choose whether or not to do it again. It follows the sun. Mercury, right, always follows the sun. Mercury cannot be too far away from the sun. He's always in the same sign as the sun, the sign right before or the sign right after. That's as far away from the sun as Mercury can get. This makes sense because the sun is about identity. It's about soul purpose, your soul, and what it's there to bring light to shed light to. It's everything from your innermost core to how you project that with your egoic persona. And Mercury, being your words, is one way that you can externalize that core self. You can make that self known, self expression. Mercury is expression, it's communication. It's also what, experimentation, innovation. Excuse me. I have to blow my nose. This congestion is like insane. It's really unfortunate. Anyway, so the point is though, Mercury is our ability to manipulate. And I want to just preface this by saying when I use the word manipulation for the most part, I'm using it as a complete neutral. When you manipulate somebody's emotions to make them feel better, you're nonetheless manipulating their emotions. When you write a story and you're intending to make your audience cry and feel things and get, really intense insights about what you're doing or whatever, you're manipulating their emotions. Like that's emotional manipulation. How good you are at it is actually what determines how how upset people get. Like when you read a book and you're like, oh my God, they're just pulling on my heartstrings. Like they're just trying to manipulate the audience. Like, oh, it's because it's a bad illusion, right? Mercury is the ability of that we have to weave illusions and stories and narratives consciously with purpose in accordance to what we want, in accordance to our own self-expression. And when that's masterfully done, it becomes, you get absorbed in the narrative, right? You feel it as though you were experiencing it. Like when you read a really good book and the character goes through some kind of intense emotional trauma, you feel that trauma. Like you cry with them. When they're embarrassed, you blush with them. When they're happy, you're joyous with them because you're so immersed in this illusion that someone else has artfully woven together for you. And that's the strength of Mercury, and it's incredible. It's an incredible power. But when it's done poorly, when it's done hammeredly, when you get propaganda from your government, for example, and you go, oh, fuck you, right? You're just trying to make me feel this way because it suits your agenda, because you want to make money off of me or exploit me. When you see these kinds of things happen and it's upsetting, it's because, first of all, the illusion is not based in or revealing a truth, most likely. And second of all, it's transparently self-serving and it doesn't play to this greater oneness, right? It's just kind of, it's like embarrassing to watch, right? Isn't it so cringy when you read something that's supposed to be really heartfelt and dramatic, but actually it falls flat and it just feels artificial and fake and pandering, and like it doesn't really touch on any kind of core emotional truth. Like it's embarrassing to see a storyteller weave together something that is weak and transparent and ugly. And like it's harsh to say that, I know, but we've all had that experience. And yes, tastes will vary and there's a certain amount of subjectivity involved. I'll give you that. But when we see stories that are bad, there's a lot of ways they can be bad. They can be bad because of technical issues and overlooked. I unfortunately fall victim to this all the time. I really struggle with spelling because I, have a little bit of a dyslexia going on here. And I feel very insecure about that. But some people can overlook it. Some people that really like drives them right out of the narrative real quick, and it's a shame, but it happens. Sometimes it's because, we have something good to say. It's not that the thing is untrue, but the way that we get there is it's for whatever reason, I don't know. It's convoluted, right? It takes too long. It's not direct. It's not clear. It's too clear. There's no artistry. There's no wind up. There's no twists and turns that make you really, how's this going to go down, that get you invested. There's so many ways for a story to succeed, and there's so many ways for a story to fail. And that's part of the struggle with the humanities, and why early on in English, in your English classes in high school, people are like, it's all bullshit, you just make it up. It is and it isn't, right? Made up things can be incredibly powerful when they bring about greater truths. Lies are powerful when they reveal a truth. When they're when they're intending to only deceive, when they cover up a truth, then they are frustrating. Then they are sad and pathetic and angry. When we tell stories, when we tell lies to cover truth, it is nefarious and evil. When we tell stories, narratives, essentially lies, to reveal greater truths, they can be incredibly valuable and insightful. Some of the greatest things I've learned about myself, I've learned through my relationship with people that don't exist. Right? Like with characters, with people, like with mythology, for example, right? With a good story. Those stories don't need to be true to be meaningful, but there has to be something true about them to be meaningful. And it's a very nebulous line to walk. So, when I see the magician and the moon together, I think about the stories we weave and how they make us feel. When the moon is reversed, they don't make us feel good. Maybe they are very cleverly, very intricately woven together stories, but maybe they only bring us anxiety and despair. And yeah, there's a place for tragedy, and there's a place where that can really help us reflect on things, but woof, right? And I think about propaganda. I think about getting people riled up because why? So you can do something nefarious in the sidelines so that you can pit us against each other while the true villains go on victorious. Like, I think about the ways that emotions are manipulated, right? The way that this oneness, that faith and spirituality and belief, all these wonderful Piscean things, this romance, the way that narrative romances are misused, like any tool, right? The way that they're misinterpreted even. So I think about the magician, artfully weaving stories and narratives, pulling upon the threads of fate and free will, creating songs and melodies and music out of meaningless sounds of chaos, right? It's all about the pattern. If you have an instrument and you don't know how to play it and you just kind of bang along on the strings or the keys or whatever, it just creates noise. But that same instrument in the hands of the learned, in the hands of somebody who's studied and practiced and cares and wants to convey something meaningful, becomes so valuable and so beautiful. But it's the same chaotic notes that's just rearranged in an order that matters. And I think that's so amazing. This line that we walk every day with the narratives we tell ourselves and each other, with the stories that we choose to exalt or to defame or to dismiss, with the music that we make and appreciate and moves us, and the music that we say is trash, is noise, is garbage, and the line of subjectivity in those things. One person's heavy metal amazing experience is another person's chaotic noise garbage, and at a certain level, that is subjective. Some people love and are the truth of heavy metal that they get is this expression of like this violent need to be heard, right? Or this kind of like big emotional pain that cannot be contained in a logical sequence of melody. It has to be screamed, right? It has to be just like ripped, right? And I think that's what draws people to heavy metal and to like really big, intense, because they have big, intense feelings and they like that somebody is expressing a big, intense feeling. But for other people, that becomes noise, that becomes chaos. It's too overwhelming. The lyrics are lost in the screaming delivery. And I oftentimes wonder the line of subjectivity. I mean, it takes all sorts, right? One person's trash is another person's treasure. Sure, that's fine. That makes sense. And that's why we have all these different artists, right? You can get the same kind of meaning from heavy metal as you can from a really intense, I don't know, a really intense war book, right? Or some kind of narrative about war times. And there's, I think, maybe a parallel there that can be cathartic and good and nice for different people for different reasons, different times, but in similar ways. And I think it's important that that catharsis is reachable. And so it's really good that we have like heavy metal and also classical music and also pop and also rap and also country and also all of the genres, right? Because we are all experiencing different things and we like different things at different times. And I think that all of these genres can be beautiful and can lead us to truth. Things are beautiful when they lead us to truth, even lies, even stories, even mad, rambling, I don't know, messes of chaotic noise, right? It can be music if it's what you need to hear, if it leads you to something good, to something valuable, to something true and integral about yourself, about your connection to everyone and everything. Or it can be mindless garbage, right? And it just like I sometimes wonder, like, is there an objective line? Is it always subjective? Is it circumstantial? I mean, literally one time I was going through the hardest thing when I was trying to decide to become an artist. And there's something in me that wants it so badly. And it's so funny. I'm like, coming out of high school at that time that happened. And I'm watching The Matrix of all things. And The Matrix is a really good movie and points to a lot of truths. But I felt it speaking to me specifically so clearly about this whole like life trajectory I was taking. And it's so funny because now when I watch The Matrix, I can't see that at all. I totally see, what The Matrix is about, this whole awakening to the greater truth and like, is it better, is it worse? And there's a lot of things that The Matrix, the movie, touches upon, right? And the lines between technology and illusions and deceptions and dreams and reality, and at what point does something become real, and at what point is the real more valuable than the illusion or the narrative? Is it worth it to take the red pill or take the blue pill? And I think that I heard what I needed to hear in the narrative of The Matrix. And even though they were not intending to tell me that particular thing, it still led me to my own specific truth because it was the type of truth I was receptive to at the time. And The Matrix is a good narrative, in my opinion at least. And I do think that there's this amazing ability that art has. And art is, I think Plato is probably correct, a lie. Plato I used to get so mad at. He's saying artists are liars and thieves and so low. And even Homer, the greatest, of all time, he says is still a liar because he's not dealing with the real. He's not dealing with the ideal, which is better than the real. He's dealing with like a projection of a projection of a projection, right? The shadows of the cave, as the metaphor goes. And I was so mad at him for saying that, but he's right. He's right. It's an illusion, right? Art is an illusion. When you paint a picture of a pipe, it's not a pipe. It's not even a picture of a real pipe. It's it's not even it's not even you seeing a real picture of a real pipe. It's a different person's interpretation of a pipe. And what is it but it's not that's not the point is not that it's a pipe. The point is what it symbolizes. The point is what it makes you think about, what it makes you feel, right? And so, I don't know, when I was younger, I was so mad because I was so dedicated to truth. And I still am in many regards, but I've come to realize that truth is a spectrum of thing. And it's how you get there is incredibly changeable. There are so many ways to arrive there. And I think in a lot of ways, tarot has really helped with that. When we look at the magician, we see the wand, which represents fire. We see the cup, which represents water. We see the coins, which represent earth, and the sword, which represents air. And all of these are tools of the magician. All of these are valuable. Your intellect can lead you to truth. Your emotions can lead you to truth. Your material, embodied, physical experiences can lead you to truth. Your passions, your spirituality, your drive, your ambition and motivation, that can lead you to truth. All of these tools can be used to lead you to truth. And they can all be used to deceive you and to lead you away from truth, to cover truth. It's a matter of how you use them and how they get you to, you know what I mean? So I don't know. But the point is, though, when I see the magician upright and the moon reverse, what I think of is the narratives that we are being told are not true, and they're making us feel very, very anxious. We know that there is some kind of illusion, deception, deceit, because the magician is upright, and we understand what's going on to some level, but it does not negate the feelings of emotional anxiety. The feeling of being lied to is a really shitty feeling. And when you feel like you're being lied to, from all around you, that's a tower situation. When you can't trust, you don't know if you can trust your government, you don't know if you can trust your health industries, you don't know if you can trust your neighbors, you don't know if you can trust your politicians, you don't know if you can trust your teachers. What is that? What is that? Pisces is about trust. And the disintegration, the systematic disillusionment, right? This whole this is it's a tower moment when you have so much information and you cannot tell what the truth is out of this information, and you don't know where to get it, how to get to it, where to get back to it. Like, that's an incredible tower moment. And I do kind of think that this is, in a sense, where we are and where we're headed, but also what we need to push through to get back to center, to get back to something that makes sense. One thing that they did touch upon in Chris Brennan and Austin Kopic's collab podcast, the 2025 horoscope, I forget what they call it. I think they just call it the year ahead. I think it's pretty intuitive, but uh, one of the things they say about Saturn and also Neptune in Aries is being unable to tell what is true and what is not. And at the same time, I will add also, like, fighting about it, right? Because it's in Aries, we're going to be fighting about it. And I don't condone violence. I don't like that. I like to believe that we can move past it as a culture. I haven't seen that so far, but I also like to think that just because something has never been done doesn't mean it can never be the case. There have been examples in history of people walking away from power for the betterment of, for what they saw, the betterment of the whole. There have been cases of peaceful transitions of power. There have been cases of people acting in favor of the collective when it was necessary and then stepping down when it was not. And there have been cases of people genuinely doing good and trying to be good and trying to help people at the expense of their own safety. That has also existed in the past. So there's precedent for it, And I like to think that it could get better. It could. We need to believe that it could so that we can try and fight for it getting better. If we believe truly that it's doomed and it's done and we've passed our prime, then what can we do, right? What's the point of anything? It doesn't serve us, that belief. We have to think about our feelings and we have to acknowledge them. And we have to think about our beliefs and our values and what they lead us to and what truths they reveal about us. We have to think about these things. And We also we also don't have to be ruled by them. We can also change them. We can critique them and evaluate them. We can like figure it out. We can get better, right? Just because you've always felt a way in the past doesn't mean you have to feel that way in the future. There can be some other way. And I think the magician also speaks to that, because the magician is the part of ourselves that can chart our course forward independently how we want it, right? That can manipulate our futures based on the evidence of our past, right? We can figure out what works and what doesn't work, and what is true and what isn't true. And we can do that by thinking about it, by thinking about cause and effect, and interacting with that on an intellectual and also, emotional level. But it's going to be a time. I think it's going to be a time. This didn't exactly intend to turn into a reading for the new year, but I guess it is on my mind, and it's probably on everybody else's mind because everyone's thinking, and I'm sure you've heard about it. If you're into astrology at all, you've probably heard astrologers talk about how this is the year where everything changes. And I do think conflicts are like that, but this is one of the things that I tell people about the tower. So first of all, anytime that you build a structure, you are inviting its destruction, because nothing lasts forever. And life is about adjustment and adaptability. If you build towers, towers of the mind, foundations upon which you build yourself, your entire identity, and they cannot withstand reality, they are not doing you favors. And so the fact that they are destroyed is deeply uncomfortable and also deeply necessary, right? We need to build better towers. And you know what? Systematically, ritually, cyclically, we will need to destroy our towers because situations change, foundations become eroded, stuff happens, right? Entropy ensues. There isn't a state of fixity ever. That's an illusion. So, yeah, it's great to preserve the temples of the past, but someday the pyramids will be gone. It will just be the case. Someday the world will be gone. And it doesn't matter how well they were built at the prime of their building. They just will be gone, you know? And yeah, I am sad about that. I love the past. I find a lot of romance and mystery and inspiration there. But it is what it is. That's reality. And building more shit on foundations that are not stable does not help anybody. And so this is the other thing I tell people about the tower. The tower really is associated with Mars. Everybody has a Mars in their chart. That means everybody has a Mars at their disposal. Getting Mars to work for you is practice, is something that takes a lot of practice. Mars is a weapon. It is the weapon of our passions, of our drive, of our anger. And weapons need to be used responsibly and with practice. You need to learn how to use them, right? It's not something that you're necessarily born knowing how to do. Yeah, any infant can pick up a thing and wave it around, but there's a difference between holding a weapon and using a weapon, right? And Mars is our individual weapon. It's our individual ability to fight for what we need, for what we believe in. Mars has virtues, but it is a malefic planet and it is known for its vices. A Mars that is not worked with, a Mars that is ignored and relegated, pushed aside, left in the shadow realm, is a destructive, evil Mars. Because what are you going to do? Mars is Mars. Mars is going to be conflict and aggression and violence, and it needs an outlet. And whether we give it a constructive outlet or not is the difference between a successful, ambitious, courageous Mars filled with valor and victory, and a deceitful, ugly, crippling, evil, backstabbing, mean, awful, harmful Mars. Everybody has a Mars, but we have that within us, right? We get the opportunity to figure out how to make it work for us. That's the magician capacity, right? We have to think about it, think about our triggers, think about the things that we love and hate, the things that bring up these intense emotions. We have to think about that, and we have to figure out how we can use them. A Mars in Cancer is a fallen Mars, but a Mars in Cancer is incredibly protective about the things that they value and love. A Mars in Cancer is willing to fight and die for their beautiful, precious baby, whatever that baby is, right? Whether it's, a physical offspring or an idea, a concept, a nation, a country, whatever. Mars in Cancer fights for what it needs to feel safe. A Mars in Cancer fights for the people that they love. It's powerful, but yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult because if you believe always that what you love is under attack, then, that's a hard spot to be in. maybe unnecessarily suspicious and aggressive of others. There's also the fact that, a Mars in Cancer is a Mars that is emotionally led. Austin Coppock, in one of his courses in the Fundamentals of Astrology class, he calls Mars in Cancer uh, like a werewolf, right? Because an individual gets subjected to these forces not of their choosing, right? On times that they don't choose. And then they become, bestowed with incredible martial virtues of strength, but also rage, and are unable to control it. And oftentimes end up hurting the people that they love. And it's because it was emotionally led. It was led by the moon. It was uncontrolled. It was a time that they didn't choose, right? It's not a motivation that is logical. It's a motivation that is lunar, that is emotional, that is physical. Anyway, and I thought that was really, really astute and really a good way to think about it, because in Mars and Cancer, one of the pitfalls of a fallen Mars is that you cannot control when to do it. You can't control necessarily when you feel a certain way. I mean, you can try to influence it. You can notice patterns of cause and effect. You can notice that if you get upset, certain things calm you down, or certain things upset you, so you can kind of try to avoid it, but you can't always 100% be successful. So so yeah, having Mars controlled by your feelings is difficult, but it can be a strength, and it depends on how we use it and how good we get, how practiced we get at using that kind of Mars. Excuse me. So my point is, what I tell people about the Tower is that if Tower is Mars, then it is a weapon that you get to use. You get to figure out how best to use it and how you can use it. Sometimes that requires inventive problem solving. Sometimes, it's a creative problem, it needs an inventive solution, right? Or it's an inventive problem, it needs a creative solution, I guess, whichever you prefer. Sometimes it's going to take a little bit of thinking or a little bit of feeling, a little bit of practice. But it's a tool, right? You are both the tower collapsing and the force collapsing the tower. You can be on either side of that coin. And the tower showing up in a reading usually denotes circumstances that are at least somewhat beyond your control. I forget who it was that said this. I think it might have been Blaze. He's a really good astrologer. I think it goes by Astro Blaze on Instagram, I believe. Astro Max, I think, maybe, actually. I think it's Astro Max, but he also goes by Blaze. Anyway, the point is, I think it was him that said, Saturn is the line in the sand, right? Saturn is the rule. Saturn is, you cannot do this. And Mars is the reaction that happens when those rules are transgressed. When you draw a line in the sand and you say, you cannot talk to me this way, and somebody talks to you that way, and I don't know, you punch them in the face, right? Saturn is the, you cannot do this, and Mars is the punch in the face. I think it's an old saying, right? Everyone's got a plan till they get punched in the face. Mars is so reactive. And Mars is that part of you that someone says something, does something, something happens, you see something, and there's just a fire in you instantly, right? That's your Mars. So you got to remember what causes those fires and how you react to them. I'll tell you something. My Mars is in Gemini, and when I get mad, my words turn into weapons, like big time. I say the meanest shit when I'm mad. And when I was younger, I was bullied often verbally, and I had to get good at comebacks, right? That was a priority for me when I was young, like in elementary school to middle school. It was something I worked on and then I honed. And I got really fucking good at it. I got good at recognizing people's mental weaknesses and then just stabbing them, right? Just absolutely destroying them, because I felt that that was what was happening to me. And as I grew older, I realized that, wow, okay, this is an ability, but I need to learn how to turn this off. Because I was like hurting people I didn't want to hurt. I was like giving zingers, just because I saw the opening. And I was like, that's shitty. That's a bad thing to do. That's doing the same thing that people did to you that made you feel shitty. Like, there's a time and a place, And so then the later half of my life up till now has been about controlling that and been about when to use it, right? If Mars is a weapon, and weapons need to be honed and they need to be practiced with, they need to be taught you need to be taught how to control it. And Mars absolutely is a weapon. It's a weapon that we have within us. What triggers it, how to use it, how to control it, how to maintenance it, how to fix it, nuance it, that is the That is the question, right? That is working with Mars real energy, is playing with fire. Fire is an amazing tool, the first best thing ever harnessed, but it can burn you. And that's what Mars does, right? It's, a punch in the face, maybe stops more conflict, maybe it brings more conflict on. You got to assess the situation. You got to figure out how to work with it. And when we see the tower and we see destruction in our lives and things happening, upheavals and changes and chaos, uh, you better ask yourself, how am I going to work with this chaos? Because you better bet that the people in charge, your enemies, whoever you perceive them to be, they are going to be asking themselves that question too. So that's what you got to ask yourself. When the world falls apart and there's chaos, you think, how can I use this? How can I use this to my advantage? That's Mars and Mercury, right? That's figuring it out. And you know what? You are an individual worthy of love and life and respect, same as any other individual worthy of love and life and respect. But at the end of the day, you have to fight for you. And your emotions are going to be a big part of that. And we also have to be careful not to be misled by daydreams and illusions, right? Just because we feel threatened doesn't necessarily mean we are threatened. I'll tell you this, when you grow up and you're young and you're bullied because people think you're stupid because you can't spell, they can't read your penmanship or whatever, that's something that happened to me. I think it's not an uncommon experience. When that happens, you become very sensitive about your intelligence, and you might perceive threats when they aren't there because you're used to it, because you felt it in your past. Part of the moon and part of Pisces, part of this oneness that is experienced, is kind of combining every experience it's ever had, the past, the present, hopes for the future. That's part of what makes it so difficult to learn to act and to work with these things, because yeah, just because you felt this way in the past and there was reason for it in the past does not mean that there's going to be reason for it in the future. Just because somebody made a joke at your expense in a really cruel, awful way when you were young doesn't mean that every little jab is meant to destroy you. That sometimes that's how people joke around. Sometimes it's just a funny thing to say and you have to let it go. And learning to tell the difference, which is a Mercury thing, to tell the difference between which emotions, which experiences are valuable and useful and which are destructive. I think that's going to be a thing. I think that's always a thing, but I think that's really going to be a thing for this new year, because learning about which narratives are destructive, which cause us anxiety, what our anxieties really tell us, right? Because at the end of the day, even if they're triggered by a lie, the fact that we are anxious about it also does reveal a truth about ourselves. And maybe it's very useful to know that, So, I don't know. Keep an eye out. Keep an eye out for it. So it says, I'm so happy that you decided to become an artist. We have such beautiful tarot. Oh, thanks. Yeah, I'm happy with it too. I think I was really born to be an artist, but I don't think there's anything else I could really do. I have it's so interesting too, because this is one thing that Austin Coppock says in his Fundamentals of Astrology course. I think it's super valuable. Planets that are in fall are not necessarily weak. He describes them as like falling into a trap, right? That there's something really appealing or really enticing about this sign for that planet, but they get stuck. There's some kind of pitfall there, right? I think, for Mars and Cancer, it seems really obvious, right? Because, Cancer has a lot of feelings. And Mars is not about, Mars is about feelings, right? It is, essentially. It's about angry feelings, but feelings. And Cancer is very protective. It wants to defend itself and what's really important. It's the nurturer. And there's something very enticing, I think, from a martial perspective of defending that which is valuable and precious to you. And I think Mars gets stuck because not every single feeling is worth fighting and dying for. Not every I have a child. I love them. I have 2 children. I love them to death. I would fight or die for them, obviously. But not every playground tussle is one where I need to get involved to the extreme martial extent, right? They're gonna have trials and adversities. Their friends are gonna call them names and make them feel bad. And while there is a part of me that wants to go in there and beat that fucking shit out of that other kid, because again, my moon is in a Mars sign, so yeah, my instinct is to fight. That's not appropriate, right? It's not appropriate for an adult to get in there and get mean and dirty with a child just because that child is mean to their own child, right? That's not a good thing to do. And obviously not something that I will do. But there is a part of me that will want to do it. And I have to recognize that's part of my Mars, right? That's part of my Mars because my Mars controls my moon. And I think that Mars in Cancer, there's a similar vibe where our emotions are incredibly triggering to the martial virtue. And I think, for good and for ill, where we perceive threats to our immediate environment or to ourselves or to our children or to the things that we care about, even when that's not the case. And we're willing to kind of like, I shouldn't say willing because it's emotionally led. It's almost like we're triggered into these kinds of martial outbursts, even though we know we shouldn't. I think that a Mars in Cancer is kind of a Mars that acts on feeling, and the feeling, and on the one hand, I'm sure an individual will know, maybe this is not the best thing to do. But it's that flare of passion that is emotionally brought, much like the werewolf on the full moon. Like you can't really control it. It just bursts from you. So then it becomes, working with it, figuring out, okay, how can I deal with it? If I can't control it, how can I manage it? How can I redirect it? How can I work with it? Those are the Mercury questions, What can I do with it? If I can't control when it happens, can I control which direction I face when it goes off, right? What am I doing in that moment? Anyway, so those are things to think about. Said late to the party, but Happy New Year. Yeah, Happy New Year, everybody. And I'm so glad to see you all here. Thank you so much. And I'm super excited because my Patreon horoscopes are on time. So if you are a member of my Patreon and are a member of that tier, please go and read it on the 1st because it's available today on the 1st. And I'm really proud of that. Obviously that's always my goal. But lately it's been like on the 2nd or the 3rd. So I do have Kickstarters to deal with, and that does really set me back time-wise. But anyway, I gotta wrap this up because I have to go to my mom's party. I'm already late. But suffice to say, right, this is going to be a wild year, and I think it's going to be important to recognize that not everything we feel is based in fact. However, our feelings are still important. They connect us to ourselves and each other. We need to analyze and think about them. We need to feel them. We need to sort through things, and we need to figure out, we need to deal with this situation. It's going to be a time. There's going to be a lot of changes, and change brings upheaval and chaos. And so you need to be asking yourself, how can I work with this? What can I do? Right? Because, your enemies are going to be thinking that too. Everybody's got to make it work for them. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't know. That's just how it is. So, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. I'm so happy to be starting all of these new things and really going forward in the new year with like more YouTube content, more podcasts, more Patreon content, more decks. I'm so excited to be working on Acanthus and Crow in earnest. We're going to be getting that Oracle deck down soon. And then after Acanthus and Crow will be the Children of Yule. And I'm very excited to start. I mean, I have actually done a couple, I've started on the Fool for the Children of Yule already. So, progress is always happening. I'm just inconsistent about it. It goes from one deck to the other because that's just how I focus. Mars and Gemini will do that. I can get really passionately motivated about 10 different things and then go from one to the other like a fucking zigzag connect the dot. Anyway, it's why it's part of the reason why my decks take longer, but I have a lot coming, so I'm very excited about it. And sneak previews of Acanthus and Crow, my astrological Deconic Oracle deck can be seen on my Patreon. Also, the Onyx Tarot can be seen on my Patreon. I do try to keep some things like, early access, but then they become public. So it's worth following me on there just to see those previews eventually anyway. Even if you don't want to be a paid subscriber, that's fine. But obviously I would really appreciate the support. If you find value in it, that is one awesome way to, that's an awesome way to reciprocate, right? It doesn't have to be a lot. Tip me $2 a month, please. Anyway, sorry. I don't know how to be self-serving. Ugh, feels icky. Anyway, though, I am having fun with my Patreon. It's pretty nice. I showed Instagram, so I'm going to show you guys. One of the tiers on Patreon is a spell jar that I do a special astrological election with a special spell. And then this comes with a nice little note about what the spell is for. I really like this one a lot, so I'm very happy about it. So I get to show people. Because, whatever. Sun and Mercury and Leo have to show off my intellectual projects. But I'm really excited I love making the spell jars, you guys. They're so fun. I like to elect a special astrological day, and then I do the incense. I say the prayers to the respective deities that I'm trying to invoke, the planetary, pretty much always. Um, and then, I write, do the spell, put the little jars together. I love working with all those different ingredients. And then I get to do the write up too, that kind of is like a brief little explanation about like what it is. And the way that I conceptualize spell jars is working. It's like an aroma diffuser, You like capture those planetary influences and then gradually over time they kind of just continually release. So that's how I visualize it. I'm really excited about them just because I just love making them, honestly. Maybe having a Mars and Gemini also makes you like to do handcrafty things, because I love like making malas, doing like the hand knotted beading work is so fun and fulfilling. I love like doing the spell jars, like portioning out all these little things and being able to see the ingredients. I don't know. I love that part. I love the hands on part. So Patreon is really fun because it gives me more opportunities to do that kind of thing. So it's nice. I don't know. That's nice. So yeah, happy new year, everybody. I cannot wait to go on this journey with you. I'm very excited. I'm nervous, don't get me wrong. 2025 is, I think it's going to be a big year astrologically, but I think there's going to be some real highlights, and I mean, first of all, like whatever, we get an exalted Venus like right off the bat, and then we're gonna get an exalted Jupiter, and that's gonna be great. Worried about some stuff, but I'm looking forward to other stuff, and that's just always how it is, right? So stay safe, stay happy, stay magical. Well, stay happy if you can. I don't know when it is appropriate and convenient. I don't want to tell you how to feel, but yeah. See you later.